Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I am pumped about this show. We got John returning, we got James returning, and Sean and myself, and we're going to be getting into love's expression as it is Valentine's Day, and I am stoked for this. But while I'm stoked, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails when we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section and we can hit those throughout the show. Other than that, we'll get into some intros real quick, and then we'll get right into the convo. So, Gronski, quick 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
All right. John Gronski, live in Florida now, but I'm a Pennsylvania guy. Served on active duty and in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard for approximately 40 years. And Chance, I'm just glad to be with you all.
Yeah, super great to have you back. And I'm digging the lights in the background. The new setup is very nice. Dailey,
thank you.
How about yourself?
John Dailey. It's, I think, my third time on here, so happy to be back. I spent 21 years on active duty in the Marine Corps in Special Operations, and I think I'm at 17 as a government civilian, continuing to train Marine Raiders. So I'm just happy to be here.
Bam, I love it. James, how about yourself?
James Geering, originally from England, became a firefighter paramedic in America, spent 14 years doing that, transitioned out after seeing the ill health of my profession, want to do something about it. So I started the Behind the Shield podcast and wrote some books.
One or two. Just no big deal. I love it, James. Sean, how's life out in the mountains?
Things are good here. It's going to be an interesting conversation because, of course, it loosely referring to Valentine's Day being today, and then, the subject of love. It's a complex subject, and this is a complex day. And I can say that because I spent a little bit of time digging into the history of Valentine's Day, and it's kind of not what I thought it was. It's a bit dark, to be honest. I'm not sure if we'll get into the history of Valentine's Day, but I do think it has some relevancy to the subject, but I'll get into that maybe later.
Right on. We will get into that later. I want to touch this off on a thought that I had earlier, and then we can see where the conversation goes from there. I was thinking about Valentine's Day and love and all this stuff, and I realized that how we express love changes dramatically depending on our environment, on the people we're talking to, where we are, and what's going on. In the fact that most of my time in the military, where I felt that I was loved was by dudes slagging on me, right? by getting punched in the shoulder, by being talked down to a little bit, by being pushed to be better, by being held accountable, by all of these things that most people don't associate with love. And so I want to get your guys' thoughts on that, and then we'll see where we go. Gronski, you're on top. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you're going to lead soldiers, you've got to love them. If you're going to be an effective leader, you really have to love the people you lead. You have to love the work you do. If you don't, that's going to show through. And then, my family, I've been married just over 44 years now. My wife and I got married when I was a first lieutenant, and she's been through a lot of tough times with me, separations and that type of thing. And my two children, they're both in their early 40s. Stephen was a Marine. Timothy was in the Army, deployed to Iraq and then Afghanistan, and the love you have to have for your kids. So, when we talk about love, it goes certainly far beyond the people we lead and the work we do. It also has to come back to family, and that's my thought on it. Chance?
100%. James, what are you thinking?
It mirrors the military. They always say in the fire station, if they're making fun of you, they like you. And if they're not talking to you, that's when you need to be worried. And I want to kind of mirror what Gronski said. this has become ever more apparent now when it comes to advocating for the wellness, of your people, for the performance of whatever your profession is, and the impact that has on the people that we serve or the people that we defend. So it's ever apparent if that love is there, because that love sometimes requires moral courage. So we can see, whatever the rank, we can see the people who truly love the job and love the people they work with.
I love that. Dailey, what are you thinking?
Yeah. I mean, joining the Marine Corps right out of high school, love was a word that never got used, right? But it was there, right? It's there. There's I'm not a Bible guy, but there's a scripture from the Bible that says, no greater love hath any man that he would lay down his life for his friend, right? So that's that sort of recognition that yeah, I'll punch you, I'll make fun of you, I'll do all these things, but at the end of the day, I'll also die for you. And I grew up in I didn't get married until a little bit later. So I think that the idea that kind of love really shaped the way I viewed, as a kind of a utilitarian thing in some ways. And certainly as you grow as a leader, you begin to realize that as John said, that you can't really lead unless you lead with love, right? Unless you love what you do, unless you love the people that you serve. And I think leadership is recognizing that you're becoming more of a servant every time you put on more rank. So I'm rambling now.
No, I'm digging it, Sean. What do you got?
So today I was struggling with Valentine's Day as a concept, as it's represented in modern society right now, because I think it's being co-opted into, as it turns out, it's over nearly a $30 billion US billion-dollar industry just in the United States. So it's a massive corporate commercialized advertisement for love, and it doesn't really work for me. Especially when you look at the history of how Valentine's Day came to be. And again, maybe we'll get into that later, but I'm going to try to stick to your specific question, Chance. For me, when I think about these kind of things, I consider like love beyond romance. So like there's your romantic love, and that's, most of the people that I know today will throw up a photo with their partner, and they'll be on a beach, or they'll be jumping out of a plane, or they'll have daggers in their teeth, or whatever they'll be doing. They'll be doing it together. There'll be some sort of romantic connection, romantic love, and that's what will be the representation of love today. It will be the love with romance. But what I'm more interested in today is the love beyond romance, the love for your fellow man or woman. And so as I was coming into the conversation, grabbing my coffee, walking into my office thinking, it's going to be good to see the boys. Bam, that was it. And, the love for the guys on the panel today, they're taking time out of, what is possibly arguably one of the most delicate days for a dude in North America, where you better not screw up, bro, or you're going to hear about it. And so we're all taking time out of our day to show our love for our fellow man, to try to talk about this topic in a way that is maybe helpful to our fellow man. So to me, I was raised in the military with a love beyond romance. It really was about that. Man, you called me what? I'm in the game. I'm on the team. The love for my fellow man is through the chirping and the shoulder punching and just the general teasing camaraderie. So I'm with you, Chance. I feel that if it's radar silence, man, you're in trouble. If you're not hearing the pings every once in a while, it means that you just better start checking what you're putting out.
Yeah, this it really gets into some interesting territory when you think about how not only the physical expression. I like what you brought up, Sean, the fact that it is a delicate day in the fact of your partners and the romantic love and all that good stuff. But I'm wondering more so about the rest of the year. Like, how do we really express love to others without really ever talking about it? Because again, most guys, especially from our professions, we don't really discuss it, but we express it in very different ways. So I'm wondering more personally, I guess, how you express your love for your fellow man, for your team, for your crew, for your family, for whatever it is. What do you guys think?
Chance, I just wanted to say something a little bit different, and then maybe I'll get back to answering your question. But I told you before we started the show today that I was at a veterans event in South Carolina last week. About 41 veterans there. We did some shooting some sporting clays, went duck hunting together, and just spent time around the fire pit. And I had known 2 of these veterans who were there, but the other, 39, I never met before. But just because we had shared experiences, shared values, and a shared sense of serving others, there was a love that kind of formed between all of us. So interesting that if you have that shared sense of service and values, the love could easily permeate, even if you never met people before like that. Now, to get to your question, my wife and I don't make a big deal out of Valentine's Day. And the reason we don't is because we do think it's important to show our love every day. I think there's something that's not very healthy about people who, show, falling over in love with each other on Valentine's Day, but then the rest of the year showing disrespect or not being, sincere with one another or truthful with one another, honest. So I think it really comes down to the way that I like to show love to either people that, I serve with or have served with, or my wife, my family, is really by just showing them respect and showing them that I care about them in different ways throughout the year. I think that's an important thing. I'll just stop there.
I love it. James, I saw you taking notes. What do you got?
We've first got to figure out how to unmute my mic. Yeah, actually, well, the front door as well to these professions that we're in, I think that's where we forge some love too. That shared suffering, whether it's Buds or Fire Academy or whatever the kind of crucible is, that really does forge love. And it's interesting when you kind of reflect on the lack of suffering in everyday life, and we're all enjoying it. I mean, we're all sitting here now, I'm assuming, in air conditioning or heating, depending on where you are, and it's a nice temperature, and no one's trying to murder me at the moment, not that I'm aware of, at least. So it's, life is good. But it's interesting how when you suffer with a group together, whether it's, the people of New York on 9/11, or whether it's, a group of firefighters training, how that does forge love. And I think it kind of disregards all the kind of flotsam and jetsam, the irrelevant parts, and it kind of shows you the commonality. It shows you that humanity. And I think when you can tap into that shared humanity, the people of Grenfell Tower, when the fire was in London, there were mosques and temples and churches and people of all colors and creeds and ethnicities banding together to help the people that were displaced and some of the grieving families. That to me is that love that's intrinsic in all of us. It's the environment, I think, that can either encourage love or discourage love, and that can exist in a relationship as well.
That's an interesting thought, whether it is an intrinsic versus extrinsic system, because it, depending on how you were raised, depending on what environment you're in, that may not be an intrinsic value that you hold. And I like what you brought up there, Gronski, earlier about, shared values being the key to one another, in that you have to have one for the other, but at the same time, you also don't have to have one for the other. This is sweet. Dailey, what are you thinking?
I agree with both that, the having shared values, often we have shared values because we go through, like James was talking about, shared suffering. So today was kind of, I was thinking of it as I was going through this morning, because we have two classes of soon to be, hopefully, Marine Raiders training. And both classes this morning kind of took time out from what they would normally be doing. And we did an honor workout to honor Master Sergeant Aaron Torian, who died tomorrow on the 15th in 2014 in the Helmand. And through it, these Marines who were probably in grade school when he died, are learning that, hey, they're learning a couple of lessons. One, that he's remembered. They're learning his stories so that those stories continue on. They're learning, the things that he valued, because we bring in people to talk about him that knew him, and why we're, taking that time. But they also, learn that, hey, this is an organization that loves each other. And, if God forbid something bad happens to me, someday they're not going to let me die, right? They're going to continue to keep me alive. They'll continue to love my family and my children. And so I think, my experience is largely relegated to the Marine Corps, but since I've been out, I think as John said, the veterans organizations, I think it kind of hits you after a while, after you leave the service, that, hey, one, I'm missing something, and two, I've got this, I'm missing something that I loved, and I have a responsibility to give back to it. And then, once you tap into the veterans organizations, places where you can help, you definitely, for me anyway, have re-experience that and realize that, man, I've got a lot of, even for people that I didn't serve with necessarily, or even people of different services or different countries, services, right? We have a common bond that, like I said, most service members wouldn't call love, but it's, when you get down to it, that's really what it's defined as, right?
Yeah. I got a neat thought on this, but I want to hear from Sean first before I jump into another question. What do you got, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So, what is love? We're talking about Valentine's Day and we're talking about love, but what is love? When's the last time you guys wrote a book about what love means to you? I haven't. And I haven't thought about writing an entire book about love. In fact, I haven't thought about love enough in my life. It's an ephemeral, sort of a nebulous word that means so many things to so many different people. And so just in this conversation alone, we're talking about shared experiences and how that can create love. But I do believe at like a more fundamental level, it's less about the shared experience and it's more about the purpose of why you're there in that moment. Like, why do you exist in that millisecond? Why are you there? And so I think for love, there's got to be a lot more why in front of love. Why love? Why do I love this moment? Why do I love this team? Why do I love my partner? Why do I love my kids? Why do I love my life? And so love is such a big, complex word that we've simplified it, dumbed it down to a Valentine's Day term that means buy a box of chocolates. And now it's love. What, you bought the small box of chocolates? Dude, you're only half loving the day. And so, love is super complex, man. And I think that when it comes to shared experiences, which is what we've just been talking about, it does come down to a sense of purpose within that shared experience. So let's see what the thoughts are on that.
Yeah, this is it's an interesting place that I went to after listening to all you guys. I've come to understand, especially for us. Now, again, I want to reiterate that we come all from a background of service, right? And to that point, we all have that shared value as a kind of a centerpiece within our core. And so I wrote down here the surrendering to service breeds love for one another, in the fact that if I can surrender to the idea that I'm here to serve you, and you surrender to the idea that you're here to serve me, then we can both put aside our needs for somebody else, which then allows that connection to grow, at least in my mind. And that's kind of where I'm coming from this. So Sean, what do you got?
Just really quick, I think that's important, but it's not just a one-dimensional you to them and them to you. It's also you to you. Like, it's a three-dimensional model of love. And so the very idea that your purpose is to give love to a person in that moment, on the team, with your partner, with your kids, with, the person down the street. By doing that, you're giving yourself self-love. And so, the idea behind Valentine's Day, go out there and buy a big box of chocolates. If that's all you think of it as a capitalist or a commercial exchange of cash for love symbol, then you've missed the boat. But if you don't want to think any deeper than, okay, I'm going to go buy the box of chocolates. Why am I buying the box of chocolates? And then understand that it's you trying to demonstrate your love. Well, at least that's a half an inch deeper than love equals chocolates. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm tracking for sure. James, you got any thoughts?
I have, actually. That was good timing. One of the things that I've talked about quite a lot recently is I think a lot of our generation, we're all similar ages, were raised on the faux stoicism, Hollywood action movie star version of masculinity. And a lot of us found ourselves in uniform, kind of believing that you are a Marine, a firefighter, and none of this is going to phase you. You're going to be stone-faced. But then you see the struggles that we have in our profession, and you start kind of extrapolating. It is love that sent us in the uniform in the first place. The yin and the yang. Yes, there's a time where you got to go in towards, gunfire, or in my case, fire or an extrication, school shooting. And that absolutely requires that kind of RoboCop side of our psyche. But the other side, the reason why you're doing the running in the first place, is love, is compassion, is empathy. And that gets completely skewed, especially in my profession, with the unending sleep deprivation that distorts, the mind. And so I think it's important for all of us, whether you're still in, whether you transitioned out, whether you're in a completely different profession, to look at the fact that you were the yin and the yang. And that yang, I believe, the soft, compassionate side, is what drove you in. The problem is you become yin, you become a white circle. And now when you transition out, you've got that struggle. Well, I'm a Marine and no one cares anymore. So I think that going back to what Sean said, that is so important. That love that we have to show ourselves is the same love that put us into the uniform. And that purpose hasn't changed. That mission hasn't changed. You love people. And this is why I think, everyone here, you see, after we've taken the uniform off, we're like, what is the mission? The mission is still to make the world better. The mission is still to reduce the suffering. So when you realize that the uniform was a costume, that was it. Something that you're so proud to have worn, but it was a costume. You're still the yin and the yang. And when you transition out the other side, that love of humanity continues.
Bam. Beautifully put. John Gronski, I can see you got something boiling. What do you got?
Now I got a lot of stuff boiling in my mind here. First of all, I do think purpose is extremely important. And if you don't know what your why is, if you don't know what your purpose is, you're going to flounder, and you're going to just have a hard time with life, I believe. I think that's extremely important. The other thing is with love, I mean, I really don't know how to define it. I think it's one of those things, when you have it. But one of the things I think that is very important that will help you exhibit love is truly caring more for those people you lead or you are in a family situation with than you care for yourself. I think putting the needs of others ahead of your own is a true exhibit of love, and doing that in a transformational way rather than a transactional way. If you put the needs of somebody ahead of your own, but you're expecting to get something back, I don't think that's really love. But if you could do it in a way that will transform you in your relationship with that person, I think that's important. And I talk about that a lot when I do leadership workshops, and I say, the only people that are hardwired to care more about somebody than they care about themselves is generally that when you think of a parent and how they feel about their kids. Like most parents want their kids to do better than they do, and most parents will die for their kids. But if you could transpose that to feeling about those you lead the same way, your spouse the same way, I think that's extremely important. So I think that's a really key element to know if you truly love somebody. Could you, in a transformational, not a transactional way, put the needs of someone else above your own needs? I think that's a true exhibit of loving someone.
I totally agree with that. Dailey, you got any points to add on this?
Yeah, I mean, all great points. So it's hard going the last on that question because I mean, James hit on the idea that we all joined a life of service because we love something, right? And it's our country or our fellow man, and that's a part of it. But I don't think we really recognize it when we're at that age when we join. I didn't when I was at that age. Yes, I love my country. I would say that. I also wanted to kill commies. I wanted to have adventures. There were a ton of reasons. And they were all accurate and they were all valid. But early on, I suspect because I spent a lot of time, thinking about it. If a grenade, came into, the fighting position with me, would I jump on it? And was it necessarily because I loved that guy that I was with? Maybe not. But I loved the whether it was love of country, love of mission, love of I truly think I would have done that. But as you age and mature, I think you start to realize the difference, right? There's absolutely the exciting part of the job. There's the fun part, and you love to do it. All right. I mean, I loved rolling out of the gate, in downtown Baghdad in the middle of the night, going after bad guys. Loved doing that. I also loved the people I did it with. I loved the idea, the overall idea that we were, doing something that was hopefully good for people that I'd never met. But, ultimately, I think it comes down in the military to that idea that was talked about of the mission. You purpose, right? What is the purpose that we love, our why? And, that's one of the biggest things that, as it kind of was mentioned, people lose when they leave the military. So, re-finding that purpose, particularly finding that purpose in service of some other type, whether that's serving veterans or serving a community or your family, whatever that is, I think you're never going to be whole, right? Unless you have that sense of purpose, and that sense of purpose absolutely includes loving someone more than yourself.
I'm just digging this so much because I'm nodding my head consistently. Everything you guys are saying, it's 100% accurate. And I just want to touch on a couple of these comments here we got on the Instagram side. One of them from Dan Cameron says, "There are many people I call friends. There are a small few I call brother or sister. That's how I express my love for them. Or I call them an empty jackass." And I kind of want to touch on this a little bit in that, especially as men, very, very different than most women I know. We will express love for one another almost detrimentally, almost to the point of breaking, if you know what I mean, right? And we will push one another to extreme lengths, whether that's through being picked on or bugged or stuff like that, but also pushed for accountability, pushed to do better. Like if someone, I know Sean did it for me at one point where I was not living up to what I was talking about, and he held me to account. And it sucked in the moment, but that was an expression of love at the time. And so I'm wondering, just on your guys' point of view of expressing love through accountability, through holding others to account to do it better or correctly or whatever you feel. James, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I think where I've seen is less accountability, and I think that's definitely part of it. I think it's more just helping them elevate. So I'll give you my marriage as an example. When I transitioned out the fire service after trying to make a difference in the last place and realizing that the rungs of the ladder were never going to change, so waiting for old guards to switch out wasn't going to happen. That was a terrifying move for our family dynamic. I stepped away from a salary, from a pension, from healthcare, from all those things, and just, jumped with 2 feet into doing this full time. And my wife, when I put it, when I proposed it to her, she was like, "Well, this is what you got to do. Then, I'll stand behind you." Then a couple years later, she went off to medical school. We were living 300 miles away from each other and commuting and seeing each other on weekends. And she just came home Halloween. So she'll be graduating in May. That's love. And that can be a marriage, that can be a friendship, that can be, within a unit, military unit or a fire station. I think accountability is part of it, but it's, it'd be like, we have this kind of ivory tower mentality of some of the fitness population. Or if you're overweight, we just need to get up at 5 and take an ice bath and eat some lettuce and you can be like me. That's not really holding someone accountable and then giving the tools to get there. Or you can be a mentor, hold them accountable, but you've also going to hold their hand and say, let me show you how it's done. And obviously not that you're the expert, but let's find the resources in this path, your own unique path that will get you there. So I think love is actually showing up and being, supporting someone. You see this so often in so many of the interviews I've had that are with these high performers in the military and fire and sports and all these other areas. A lot of people had a crossroads, and that person who had love in their heart, a female history teacher, a male jiu-jitsu coach, whatever it was, steered them in a different direction. So I think accountability, absolutely, but I think it's being there and actually supporting that person on their journey as well. That's the real love.
Digging this, Sean. What are you thinking?
Well, interestingly enough, James, I mean, I've watched your relationship to some degree. I've watched that long distance connection over the last couple of years. I mean, whenever you put up a photo about, your wife's coming home or blah, 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 you're flying there. Like the little stories that I've seen on your Instagram account, I'm familiar with, the trials and tribulations that you've had to go through in order to be where you are today. And I think that's one of the beautiful things. That's one of the rich tapestries about love, or not, is how difficult or not the journey is. And so I'm not suggesting to anyone out there that if your life is super easy and your love is super easy, then your love is discounted. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is you can have like various forms of love, various perhaps richnesses of love. And I've seen it with James, just based on the circumstances. I see it as a richer tapestry of a relationship that is not simple to navigate. And, distance will do that. So I think it's cool to follow your story, James. And by the way, to John Gronski's point, I would say that, James, you demonstrate that love for your wife, not maybe on a too often occasion, but on what I feel to be about right, like a pretty good rhythm of demonstrating that. Because if it was too much, it would irritate me. I don't know why. And if it wasn't enough, I'd be like, what's up with James? And so for me, you've kind of chosen the right rhythm of displaying your love to people who know you. And, for whatever that's worth, there you go. And so I think that looking at love as a whole and how to demonstrate it to our fellow man or woman, I think that mentorship is a great way to do it. I think when I joined the military, whatever my understanding of love was, I would say it wasn't that very educated. My probably formal education in love was in the military when I first joined, and the love for my teammates, the love for the guys I was with in basic training, what I learned from them. And so my love language evolved over a decade plus of just punching guys in the shoulder and then getting punched back in the shoulder and kind of laughing about it. And so maybe that's not the healthiest framework for love. So, then you've got to start looking around, and mentors are great for that. So whatever I'm doing in my little world, I've got people around me that have like cold eye reviews on me, that are always throwing in their 2 cents about how to do it better, how to level up, how to be more loving, how to be ... Mentorship, if you're getting mentors throwing 2 cents at you, now you're feeling the love. But it's also your responsibility to throw 2 cents out into the world yourself as some form of a mentor, even if you think you're not mentor worthy or you're not mentor capable. There's a way for you to mentor someone, even at the simplest of levels, just with some simple advice. And that doesn't mean that you've got to put on your cruise captain hat and start giving commands about how to live a life. It just means that you've got to be a cool person and try to be helpful to your fellow man. That in itself is a form of love.
That, in my mind, goes to the difference between direction and expression, right? If I direct somebody how to do something, that's not really mentorship. That's me telling somebody what to do. But if I'm expressing my opinion as to what would be better or not, then that's me expressing my love for that I have for that person. Dailey, you got any thoughts on this?
Certainly. I think, as everybody was talking, I keep coming back to the one. I think that all of us probably, if everybody's married, has, whether it's the military or fire or long distance relationships, absolutely. I think the difficulties that we've gone through with being deployed or separated. I just approaching 33 years of marriage, and my wife has gone through something so much. I mean that it's like a tree growing, where it's getting buffeted by the wind all the time, right? It's the challenges is going to make it grow stronger than one that doesn't face those adversity. So while we don't see it while we're going through it, it's just, whether it's physical challenge, it's all kind of the same, right? It makes us grow stronger. But within the military context, I think back to going through selections or going through challenging schools, and usually you could find the instructor who is and usually they were a younger instructor who you knew that they really didn't want you to graduate. All right, they were a tab holder or a badge protector or whatever the case was. They cared about the institution, perhaps, or maybe they just really cared about thrashing you or hazing or whatever the case was. But then you would see the bulk of the cadre of the instructors going through it, that they're like, hey, I don't have love for you, right? Because you haven't made it yet. You haven't proven that you're worthy of it. But I care about the institution. I have love for the institution, and I have love for the people within the institution. So it's my role, in this particular instance, to serve as a gatekeeper, right? To make sure that you're worthy of being somebody that stands side by side with the people I do love, right? And that's when you look at it that way, I think you have to become a mentor, right? You have to view yourself as more of a mentor, right? And say that. Hey, in a perfect world, I am going to help you be the sort of person that deserves to be on this team, with people that I love, and know that you're going to live up to the task. And they're going to be somebody that that love is reciprocal.
I'm digging this. I just wrote down trusting someone to protect those you love, because that is the expression of that is deep. Like, you have to have a really deep trust in someone else to protect those you love, and especially gatekeeping.
No, not really.
No, you don't think so?
that's a no, because that's a perfect scenario. That's like, okay, I've got 4.5 days to plan how to protect my wife. I'm gonna go through my Rolodex of mega friends who are mega protective, and I've got all the time in the world to make these decisions. Or bam, now you've got no time to figure it out. You've got no friends on the nearby, and you're handing the keys to your car to your neighbor who you barely know and say, please look after my family. I might be back. Circumstances are not always perfect to hand off the keys to the throne to the next emperor in line. It could be like the scrub down the street that you barely know, that in a time of difficulty, you've got to look that dude in the eye and say, man, I'm handing my family to you. Look after them in my absence. And then you bounce. I mean, life can happen that way. And it's not just like a volcano blowing up quite by accident and you weren't prepared for it. I mean, life can throw us all curveballs. And so to plan for the right person to look after the empire, that's great. But that's not how life always plays out.
That's a good point. Gronski, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have two different thoughts. First of all, just thinking about the love that one might have for their spouse. Like I said, I've been married 44 years, but we haven't demonstrated love. If somebody was on the outside looking in, every minute of our marriage, okay? I mean, there's times when you don't like one another. There's times when you get aggravated with one another. But the thing is, you have to understand that you have it's like overcoming adversity. You've got to be able to have the grit to overcome those type of challenges that are going to put you at odds with one another. It could be so many things in life could happen. Separations, we already talked about. It could be problems with a teenage son or daughter. I mean, all kinds of things. It could be an illness that happens to maybe one of our parents or each other, whatever the case. There's so many challenges that could happen in life. And you have to have the grit to be able to get through those challenges and show that you really do love one another by displaying that grit. That's one thing. Then the other thing that came to mind is maybe the better term to use is loyalty rather than love here. But, a lot of times we talk about, especially in a military unit, a leader having loyalty to the people that they lead. But I think there's something that's a higher loyalty, and that's loyalty to the organization as well. And what I'm getting at here is standards. A lot of times leaders might feel, hey, this particular individual isn't meeting the standard, but I'm going to cut them slack. I'm going to give them a break. I'm not going to talk to them about it. And really, if you don't have the personal courage to hold people to the standard that they need to be held to, you're not only doing them a disservice because they probably could do better, but you're doing a disservice to the organization, because unless those people meet the standards, the organization is going to suffer. All the other people on the team are going to suffer in some way if this other individual isn't being held. I know the word was used earlier, accountability. And I do think that takes a great deal of personal courage for leaders to hold other people accountable and hold people to the standard, and understand that it's one thing to be loyal to the person that you lead, but there's a whole other sense of loyalty to the organization that exists for the good of everyone else. So those thoughts came to mind as everyone else was talking that I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking not only for the organization, but for yourself, to hold yourself to standards, but then set standards that you maintain for the people around you. Because if you're surrounded by toxic people and you just let it happen, that's on you.
Yeah. And then the other thing, somebody did mention self-care earlier. I don't know if they used the term self-care, but self-care is an important thing, because again, we talk about you have to care more for those you lead than you care for yourself, but that doesn't imply that you don't care for yourself at all. You've got to demonstrate self-care so you could lead well. You have to demonstrate self-care so you could be a good partner to your spouse. If you don't exercise, if you don't eat right, if you engage in constant high-risk behavior, et cetera, you're not being fair to those people in your life who you say you love. And as a leader, if you don't engage in self-care to keep yourself squared away and at peak performance, you're doing a disservice to the people you lead, because you're not going to make proper decisions. You're probably not going to have a good attitude, even if you wanted to. I mean, just all those things exist. So I don't think we talked about self-care that much, but I think that's an extremely important part of love. Self-care, self-love, whatever you want to term it.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that one. I got a comment here on the other side from Instagram. It was Blackwater Technical Diving says, "I don't need my dive computer to know how deep we are going today." I am just taking it. But the point on self-care, I heard this a number of years ago on Instagram through another person who was saying that the deepest love for yourself that you can have is to be in the best body you can be in. So like making sure that you eat right, making sure you sleep right, making sure you're getting the right nutrients, you're exercising, you're doing something you love, you're hanging out with people. In the fact that, this is one of the things I learned in equine facilitation, is that humans are a gregarious species. We need to be around other people. We have to be, in order to stay mentally stable, because we're gregarious by nature. And I think this is such a crucial point in the point of self-love, is to do things with other people that you enjoy. So like jujitsu, like going hanging out with the boys, going shooting at a veterans event, whatever it is, engaging in a community. I think is such a beautiful part of self-care, which is almost counterintuitive a little bit. Sean, you got any thoughts on this? Oh, I'll get you in a second here, James.
I mean, we're all doing self-care right now. I look forward to coming and hanging out with the boys and talking about these kind of things with people who make me think deeper about, like, deeper than any dive computer can plot. I love these combos, man. I look forward to them. We only do 2 a week. I'd do it every day. Well, we did. We did do it every day for an entire year. That was bonkers. But I look forward to it because it's the 2 days in my week where I actually get to check in on how I'm doing in respect to my own self-love. Like, if I have a show where I'm feeling a little off, it's because there's something off in my day, off in my life. There's something off in my head. There's something off in my heart. And I'll see it later that night when I rewatch the show to see how the show went for everyone. How did the guests feel about things? Did we strike a good balance between this and that? I'll always review the show. And so if I see that I'm off, then it's my job to reflect on, well, why? And I'll adjust that for next Wednesday or next Friday, the next time we have a show. And so in a sense, what we're doing in real time right now is we're trying to provide love to the external world. We're providing ourselves some self-love by looking forward to coming and doing the show. But we can also, after the fact, provide love not only to ourselves, but to others by reflecting on what these conversations mean to us later that night, later that week, refine our sense of who we are in the world around us, and in so doing, have a clearer sense of love.
That's a great point. James, what are you thinking?
So I wanted to jump in before you asked another question, because I have a question, if that's okay. Okay, so
Give her, yeah.
We've been talking about expressing love. One of the things that I've been struggling with a lot recently, my community, we have a recruitment crisis. We have a physical and mental health crisis. We're losing hundreds of first responders, year in, year out. There are some very progressive leaders that should, absolutely express their love for their people and bending over backwards to make changes. I see an apathy or an almost cowardice in some of the more extremes when it comes to not advocating for their people, doing the same thing, losing more first responders. So I wanted to kind of pull these great minds that we have before everyone kind of turns away or goes away, excuse me. How do we impart that love of their people back into some of these more apathetic leaders? Because I know that, most of them, not all, there's probably some sociopaths in uniform, but let's get the middle group. They wake up not wanting to make the environment worse for their people, but the reality is they are at the moment. They're resisting a lot of these changes that we need to make to turn our ship around. So how do we refine the love of, whether it's the fire department, whatever it is, from the union leader or the chief or the administrator, to tap back into how important it is to be morally courageous and advocate for your people?
That's a dang good question, and we have the same issue here in the CF. So let's hear what you guys think. Dailey, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, brother. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know what kind of the cause of it is. I think in the military, there's the thought that, hey, on the back of 20 years of war, people are just tired and overworked and things. But I think we really have to, we seem to be losing mentors at a kind of an alarming rate. So I think that's something that those of us who are kind of able to fill that role can do, trying to remind people of why they joined, whatever service it was in the first place. I work with a lot of kind of executives and senior leaders, and that's one of the things. It becomes so easy to fall into the grind of here's all of the things that I have to do. Reminding them that hey, there's the idea of leadership by walking around, going in and checking in and really trying to dig in to the problems that your people are facing, because the first thing you realize is that they're people. All right, they're not numbers, they're not robots, they're real people that have wives and kids and problems. And So having, like John talked about, a leadership team, particularly when you've got a sergeant major who can maybe dig in and get a little bit more information, but, across the board, trying to remind ourselves, if we're leaders, or remind the leaders that listen to us, that let's go back, think about why we got into this in the first place. And, once you do that, like you said, very few people, the psychopaths, join because they want to be on the top, or they want to be in charge. It's most of us joined for some out of some sense of service. And when you point out or kind of make somebody aware of the fact that they've lost sight of that, I think that you can see a real quick turnaround.
I am digging that one. John, you got any, or Gronski, I guess, you got any points to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, if I heard the problem right, it's leaders who are demonstrating that they're apathetic and perhaps not providing appropriate mentoring and coaching and top cover to those they lead. And you are just seeing these leaders and thinking, wow, these leaders are failing in some way. So, to me, it's a leading up issue. How do you lead up? And leading up is extremely difficult to do because it all depends on the leader. Is the leader open-minded enough that they will listen to what a subordinate has to say in terms of my behavior? If I'm leading and I have a subordinate come to me and they say, hey, boss, like, you're screwing up and this is why, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention, and maybe I have a recommendation for you. Not every boss is open to a conversation like that. So that it's an extremely difficult thing. I think the first thing you have to do is cultivate some type of trust with that leader you have, so you could have that type of difficult conversation with the leader. And again, it takes a bit of diplomacy. Some of it could be leading up by example, so maybe you leading in such a way that doesn't show such apathy, or doesn't show that you're not providing top cover to the people that you lead, might be a way to lead by example for that leader who actually sits above you. So if I'm understanding the question right, I think it's an issue of leading up. It's not. I'm not going to say it's an easy thing to solve. It's very difficult if you've got leaders in positions that are failing to lead in a way that's going to be productive for the organization. So there are just several different ways you could negotiate that. I mentioned a couple, but it's very tough. And I think the best thing you could do is take care of the people you lead. You've got a sphere of influence over the people you lead, and to demonstrate the appropriate leadership characteristics for the people you lead is probably the best thing you could do. And hopefully it's going to rub off on your upper tier leaders who may be observing you. So I don't know if that helps, but that's my thought.
That's a tough one. I remember, and this is just my own personal opinion on this one, but I think it's learning how to communicate effectively what it is your issues are. So this is just a side story, quick little one. And then Sean, I want to get your thoughts on this too. But when I was a corporal, I think my CO came in, Lieutenant Colonel, came into the canteen at the same time, and he kind of offhandedly, "Hey, Corporal Burles, how you doing? How's life?" And I was like, "Honestly, I hate my life and I want to get out of the military." And he went, "Oh, okay," and then walked off. And later that day, I got jacked up by my chain of command for not speaking to the colonel in the right manner, and that I shouldn't be engaging him like that, and blah, 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 blah. And it soured me from talking to my senior leadership. But later on in my life, I started to figure out that, like, yeah, I should not have engaged him like that. That's not the way to communicate what it was I was feeling. I was angry in the moment, but I didn't have any whys. I didn't have any plans. I didn't have any solutions. It was just, I feel like crap and I don't want to be here. And learning how to communicate not only to the senior leadership, but to yourself, I think is a big part of it. Sean, you got any points on this?
Yeah, it's a great story because that's a two-sided situation, by the way. Your boss at the time, he didn't do a very good job of communicating either. And so there's many ways he could have played that out that would have probably been a more positive outcome, but we're not here to armchair quarterback that moment. I will say that I think, to answer your question, James, specifically, which is a tricky one, I'm just going to focus on one thing, because like Gronski said, there's a bunch of different ways that maybe it could be addressed, but for whatever reason, I feel one of the pivotal problems is this self-love idea. And I'm going to propose it this way. A number of years ago, someone hit me with the term, well, dude, just, the self-love. I was like, what? Did you just say self-love to me? That actually annoys me. What does self-love mean? Like it sounded so weak. It sounded so like lame. And so because of my background, I was like, self-love, are you kidding me? I want to punch you in the throat for saying that. Toughen up. And so that's kind of how we're brought up to some degree, like, hard charging and, don't ever say the love word because it'll make you weaker. And I'm kind of being tongue in cheek, but at the same time, there's an element of truth to how we were raised in a different generation in the military, that kind of love was almost a sign of weakness, unless it was love for your man, love for your team, love for your institution. Don't talk about loving your dog too much because your dog isn't on the team yet. And so I think that self-love as a term back in the day wasn't used well. And I still think today it's not used as well as it could be. As an example, if we're all talking about self-love right now out into the internet world and making it not only appropriate to consider how to provide self-love, but how to encourage it in others. Now we're almost like moving into that unicorn and rainbows woo-woo land of everyone gets self-love, and let's super focus on self-love. And then it gets a bit too soft again for the stoic, hard-charging, bulletproof chest dude who doesn't like hearing the word love. I think there's a balance between what we're supposed to represent, maybe as lightweight leaders in our community or some sort of mentorship role, where we're supposed to demonstrate that self-love is an important aspect of improving yourself so that you can be better for others. We have to do that, but not put it across so that it comes across as quote unquote weak to people who are yet to understand that you're being strong by demonstrating quote unquote weakness. Now, it's a difficult thing to wrap your head around, that you've got to get soft to get hard kind of thing, but there's truth to it. And unless, as a hard charger, you have yet to step into that phase where you're going to get your namaste on, where you're going to chillax, where you're going to get your yin and yang balanced out, until you're in that little moment, self-love is a difficult thing maybe for you to hear. So it doesn't happen in a day. You can't flick a switch and have this all figured out. What you have to do is like get into it and get dirty in the love game to some degree and make mistakes. And I'm going to say, just be an explorer of love.
There you go. I love where you're going with this. Unfortunately, the Johns have to take off. They have timings to make. So I want to just give them an opportunity to give us a closing argument. And James, if you're cool, we'll just hang out and chat still. We'll keep this rolling. Let's start with Gronski. You got any final thoughts? Anything to pass on before you take off?
I'll just repeat what I said earlier, is love is very messy at times. And, you're going to face adversity, you're going to face challenges, and you're going to have to see that through and show that grit to overcome those challenges, and understand that the end game is caring more for those you lead, caring more for your spouse, caring more for your kids than you care for yourself. And I think that's what life is really all about. And I do like what was said earlier about purpose. Purpose is extremely important. We've got to understand what our purpose is. And Chance, I really appreciate being with you. Thank you.
Oh, Gronski, it is my pleasure having you here. I love chatting with you. We'll get you on very soon again. Dailey, how about yourself? Give us a little final thought.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think that there's the reason that a lot of marriages don't last, the reason that a lot of teams break up is because people think that love is going to be kind of unicorns and rainbows, right? That everything's going to be great because you're in love. But I mean, love's really hard work. Particularly in a relationship with a spouse or a soon-to-be spouse or whatever the case may be. It's really hard work on a team, and it's really hard work, recognizing that the idea, and I don't go around throwing around the word self-love, but I just because the people I work with, making yourself a better force multiplier, right? That means that I need to sleep, I need to take care of myself, I need to get in the gym, I need to eat right, I need to do all these things to make myself a better teammate. And if I can get people to see that, then they're doesn't matter what they call it, right? They're starting to understand that, hey, I've got to take care of myself so that I can better take care of others. And that's again, that wraps it up for me. Thanks for having me.
I love it. Thanks to John, and I cannot wait to get you both back on here. We'll let you go for now, and then I'll check in with you guys later. See if we can.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Great conversation.
James, you got any thoughts here?
I'm just kind of reflecting what was said before. I mean, it's interesting because I think that self-love is part of the equation of what I was initially alluding to, which was, the refusal to actually lead, the refusal to put your neck on the chopping block for your people because it's for the greater good. And one of the things that I really feel is at the root of this middle group that I don't think are actually tyrants in their position. I think they just lost their way a little bit. Is I wonder how many people have just not done enough of the work. So I'll give you a perfect example. Locally here, there's a fire department, and they have lost numerous young firefighters to suicide, and nothing has changed. If you can lay your head on the bed, each night and be unmoved by that, I would argue that you've probably got some work to do, mentally. I don't think that they're horrible people, but you've got to look in the mirror and say, why am I not searching the planet for solutions? And solutions have been presented and ignored, and I've seen that firsthand. And this is the department that protects my family. So this is a very, this is up front and personal, and I've seen it. But I see that kind of element a lot, law enforcement, fire, and the cost of this is obviously the lives of first responders, the families of first responders that in this environment are just crumbling at the moment. So it is an interesting perspective, because if these people really did the self-work and have these aha moments that we see, our regular soldiers and firefighters and police officers having when they travel this journey themselves, I think there would be a lot more love kind of welling back up again, this real desire to make their department thrive, make their people happy, to not have this tongue-in-cheek conversation that you'll be on your third marriage and an alcohol problem within 10 years. That seems to be like hilarious in our profession, but there's nothing funny about that at all. So I think, going back to love, not deviating from the subject too much, I think that self-love is also a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to recruitment, leadership, all these things that we've talked about, because fundamentally it's about truly caring for the people beside you, beneath you, whatever the dynamic is.
I could not agree with that more. I think the key, at least for me, is an expression, and I'm actually going to get you guys to speak on this a little bit, but an expression of gratitude through that love. So as a leader, when I'm out and about in public, I try to express love or express gratitude through my actions to the first responders that are around me. I was just at a show recently. I saw some police officers standing on the wall watching the crowd, and I gave him a little nod. I walked up to him, gave him some knucks, and was just like, appreciate you boys being here. And I'm wondering, do you think that those small moments, those little expressions from the public might also help with these situations? Because first responders have been getting not a lot of love from the public for quite a while. And I'm just wondering if you think that would apply a little bit, if more people in the public started to express that gratitude, that love, that even that a little bit of accountability to go back, like, why are all our firefighters dying? That might help the situation overall. Sean, I'm going to come to you on this. What do you think?
So I think that James is onto it. But to your question, Chance, that moment with the police officers giving them the knucks and thanking them for their service, etc. Dude, I've done that 1 bajillion times. And I think it's super important. Like, I'm not saying I've done it so much so that someone's going to give me a round of applause. I'm saying I've done it that many times to reinforce the idea that you all should be doing it. It doesn't cost you a freaking thing. In fact, you win by walking away from that moment, realizing that you did the right thing, and now you're feeling good about it. Because to walk past someone who's serving you, serving your country, serving your community, serving your event that you're going to casually sit down and feel safer for, feel more prepared for, it costs you nothing to walk by and give someone even just a casual nod. The nod is free. The knucks are free. Thank you for your service is free. It's all free with all upside. What is downside is walking past those guys and kind of like mean mugging them or sneering or disdain or looking down your nose or pretending that they work for you as service slaves. And so I think that as a society, as a whole, we all could use pretty regular reminders that it costs you freaking nothing to throw a little bit of love at someone who's serving on your behalf. Of course, it costs nothing to throw shade as well. And I suppose that is the problem. And so it comes down to accountability, as we've been talking about before. Do you even hold yourself accountable to your own thoughts in those moments? Do you reflect on your actions after the fact as to why you sneered at those police officers or flipped them the bird as you were walking by or cracked a dumb joke about donuts as you were walking by? Like, you got to think about yourself, your own actions in those moments and what it builds you into in the future, not just the moment itself, but many weeks later, how you're going to feel about how you acted. And if you're with a group, Chance, if you were walking by, if you had your kids with you as an example, or if you had another buddy who was just getting to know you and you walk over and you give the knucks and you don't make a big deal out of it, now they know, now you're patterning what the expectations of what's appropriate, what is cool in that moment to do. And so I wish that more people would do the right thing, which is to thank their fellow man when their fellow man is serving them. Man, I'll do it sometimes, like even in, I don't go to fast food restaurants much, but like in my bakery as an example that I'll be hitting later today. I'm all about thanking them, man. They see me nearly every day, but I love thanking them for the kick-ass job that they do. They're serving our community. And they're serving it with freaking croissant love. You know what I'm saying? It's not just croissants. Like, they pour themselves into their product. And I know it because I've seen it every single time I've gone in there. I feel it when I'm walking out of the store. When I'm eating my croissant, I can feel the love. And so if you feel love as you're walking past those police, even if it's just a hint, where's the harm in reciprocating it, is my thought.
It's a great thought. I just wrote down the secret ingredient is love. And it truly is, though. James, what do you got? I saw you saddle it up.
Well, I was thinking that one of the comments that was made earlier, as far as, the environment if you look at, the environment that people have been put in, we'll choose America, for example, the last 4 or 5 years, it's not one that's propagating love. There was a lot of divisions. You were told if you weren't on one side or the other side of the World War I battlefield, you'd pick your trench, then in the middle you're excommunicated, which was bizarre at the time. But I think that's now we've seen this pendulum start to swing the other way. Now we've seen people really question these uber polarizing news stations that everyone kind of treated like gospel for so long. I think it's time for us to kind of recheck the compass and find our way back to the middle. And there's a lot of power when you divide a nation. There's a lot of power when you divide a community. You can be very manipulative then. So I think it's up to us to be diligent and refine that humanity, as we touched on earlier. Become a mentor. You want to change the world, start at home. So giving, and I love the term nugs, by the way. It makes me think of chicken nuggies. Being just kind to everyone. Like, I don't even, so much say, thank you, this is amazing, to the people. I just interact like they're fellow human beings. Some work at the checkout in the grocery store, some are police officers, some are at the airport. But just seeing the human that you're talking to, being polite, being kind. I mean, I think that's so, so important. And we had this freaking, just wedge cleaved for so long now. Inherently, people are beautiful. Like I touched on in the World Trade Center, the Grenfell fire in London, the Boston, the marathon bombing. I mean, all these things, you saw people come together. That's who we actually are. So I think being diligent, discarding some of this propaganda that we all had fed to us the last few years, and refining that humanity, I think just that kindness, compassion, community, that love really is effortless, because that's actually how we're supposed to be.
Well, it's not effortless. And James, I'm going to use you as an example, because ever since I got to know you, like from day one, I've seen a guy who's worked like a dog to be a good human to everyone around him. Like, you're a good representation of using all the right language, focusing on all the right things, trying to serve at a much higher level than most people I know. Like, you've really poured yourself into serving your fellow man. You exemplify, to me, to some degree, love for your fellow man. There is never a time, James, that I've been in any kind of shared moment with you where you're not focusing on serving at a higher level. You've always been that guy. You are almost a representation of it in my mind. So on that note, like, it isn't easy. It's not easy to love your fellow man at the degree that you're trying to love, with the consistency, with the not being beaten down consistency, almost like the freaking dogmatic stubbornness that is required to serve at a level that you have. And by that, I mean, like, not just your boatload of podcasts that you've done and the boatload of guests that you've had. I'm talking about just the freaking day-to-day struggle of trying to stay positive in a really sometimes not quite positive world. I think that you've done a great job. So you do, to some degree, represent a form of love for your community that I think is pretty rare nowadays. And so it is not easy work. And if anyone knows a person like James in their life, then they deserve a frickin' pat on the back, not just a simple "thank you for your service, man," and a nug. I mean, maybe a punch in the shoulder a couple of times, pretty hard. But there's levels to the game of serving. There's levels to the game of love. And James, you're on some pretty high rungs on the ladder, I would say.
That's high praise coming from Sean, I gotta say. And to your point, Sean, you had mentioned that it takes nothing to give someone a nod or give someone nucks, but it does take something. It takes effort. It takes recognition. It takes a thought process that sets people up, as James said, as other human beings, right? And I love the idea, and I do this all the time, but when you're at a restaurant or a store or a friggin' coffee shop or whatever, you look someone in the eyes, you say please, you say thank you. It takes just a little bit of energy, but it does take something, and those little things add up through the day. And that person might not feel the love immediately, but as I said earlier, it is the secret ingredient to everything else. And I want to equate this to an actual ingredient. You have to add it to the equation. You can't just expect it to show up. It's not just going to all of a sudden well up in you and be like, oh, and you'll have this outward expression of love. It's an ingredient in the mix. You have to take it out of the cupboard. You got to take it out of your brain and apply it to somebody else. It can't ever just be an expectation, I think, is a big key to this. James, you got anything else to add?
When I'm listening to you talk, and again, thank you, Sean. That was like almost teared up listening to that. And I'll be honest, I think with the effortless point, I think to rephrase it, because I agree with you completely, that toxic, partisan environment that we found ourselves in is not exactly an easy swim up the river with bears and salmon hitting you in the face and stuff. But I think within us, that kindness and love is there. So once you actually find it, it's effortless. But like you said, how that is as far as your environment, that's a different story. But for some reason, when you were talking, I was remembering, I don't know if you ever saw this video. There was a town, I think it was in Europe somewhere. And one of the members of the community, I can't remember what he did for a living, was deaf. And secretly, the whole town had learned sign language. And they watched him, they filmed him, and he's walking through and everyone's, doing the signs. And the look on this man's face is absolutely beautiful. So just like you said, when you put a little effort in to do something kind for the community, I'm sure not only that man's day was made, but imagine the bonds that were formed as they all kind of secretly took these classes of sign language, before the final, thing. And then it goes viral on the internet and everyone else is watching it too. So the juice is worth the squeeze, as they say. Yeah, there are some people at the front, someone came up with that idea and that was probably a lot of work. But then, when you see the kind of the rest of the waterfall come down after those first couple of drops, then I think it becomes a lot more effortless. But, there's so many layers to this process. And I think, you'd see such an incredible 180 of some of the, the nastiness that we've all seen, the last 4 or 5 years. And I truly believe, that the pendulum is swinging the other way. And the more we can debunk the negativity and realize that there's so much more in the kindness, compassion, love, empathy, community. That's the body is hardwired to reward you when you're a good person, regardless of where you're on planet Earth. Unless you're kind of, a cannibal somewhere in some rainforest and you're eating people, everyone else, when you do good things, it feels good. You get that serotonin and endorphin rush, being kind when you're in love. So it's just kind of tapping back into that. But that analogy, that one village with the sign language, I thought that was it. That journey that they went on, the result was they just blew this guy's mind and it was absolutely beautiful. But imagine the journey that village went on to get to that point.
That would be quite the journey. Learning another language is not easy. And sign language I've taken a little bit of, and it is especially not easy because it has a lot to do with interpretation of the person you're speaking to and what background you come from, because sign language is different depending on where you go. So that is definitely challenging. And I've seen lots of videos, lots of stories like this. It reminded me of one where a grandson of a rancher was able to buy his childhood home at auction because no one else put a bid up, and they'd all talked about it ahead of time just so that kid could get his that home for cheaper than it would normally go. There's lots of stories out there in the world of these outward expressions of love from a community. But I'm wondering, being that person, the person that starts it all, the person that goes, you know what, I got this great idea for this, the guy down the street, he's deaf. Maybe we should all just learn sign language. But then to enact it and organize it and plan it and do all that extra work. Sean, you used to tell a story of when you were running your coffee shop and how you ran the coffee shop, right? You would say hello to everybody as they came in. You'd look up, you'd freaking make eye contact. There would be an exchange in that moment. And I think those daily interactions, those daily active moments of humanity, I think is, at least in my mind, what I'm getting from this is love's expression. The more you can love yourself, the more you can love your community, the more you can love as you go in those concentric circles. The expression becomes more fine, if that makes sense. Like, I can outwardly show expression of love to my wife, and it's obvious, But when I expand it to the greater world around me, they're going to be smaller moments, but can be just as impactful. What do you guys think? Sean, coming to you.
I agree. I think what we're really talking about is the granularity of love. And that granularity, like that small glimmer of random love from a stranger that you don't know, you share a brief moment, it's like, bam, there's a mild form of loving in that moment, a shared love. And that's a hard concept to put across with such simple terms, but it happens throughout our lives, that we'll have a tiny granular moment of love, which is radically different than like the first time I held my first son in my hands and looked him in the eyes and thought, bam, wow, what the hell, bro? That's a game-changing moment, which is radically different from the granularity of sharing a split second with a random stranger, which also has some love in it as well. And I think it's important to contextualize those big, grand moments of love versus the granular moments of love, and understand that there's like this massive bandwidth, this spectrum where you can exist between the grandest, wildest love moments right down to the randomest, minuscule moments. It's all around us all the time. It's whether you choose to see it or not. It's whether you choose to engage it or not. And again, I'm going to go back to James. It's going to be the uncomfortable James show today. James is a guy who, at least every single day I see on his new-ish IG account, where he is trying to share some love to the internet, to the community, to people who follow him. There's always a feel-good story in there, at least once a day. Sometimes there's stories that make you think, oh, man, I can't believe that dude did that thing. What a jerk. So there's some of that as well, but mostly it's the love. It's mostly inspiration. It's kind of like a love version of Aren't Humans Awesome? And so James doesn't make it too cheesy. But what I find fascinating about James's rhythm on this idea of trying to present some love out into the world, show some goodness out there, is that he's got to go frickin' find it. Like, it's not dropping in his lap, as the stork isn't delivering the good news down the fireplace chimney. He's got to go look for it. He's got to go bump into it. And when he bumps into it on social media or out there in the news that morning, like, then he's got to figure out, how does this feel to me? What am I sharing? How am I going to present this? What is my message? What is my purpose as I'm putting this message together? I think that trying to find love, to show others love in a communicative fashion, is a really complex way to get better at love. But you're going to get better if you're trying to seek it and put it out there for others on social media. I suppose the trick is not to become too trite, not to become too commonplace, not to become too every day is Valentine's Day and it's all unicorns and rainbows. There's levels to this game that will resonate with some and will absolutely not resonate with others. But I'm not for everyone. James is not for everyone. Chance is not for everyone. But if we all combine our efforts and try different angular approaches to explaining to our fellow man that love is a cool thing, then between all of us will accomplish more than just James doing his best, of course.
That's a great point, James. A rebuttal, perhaps?
No, I just want to add on to something you said before, as far as that granular element. One of my guests, I remember, we were talking about COVID, because I love talking about that period, because to me, there was an element of just sweeping it under the rug. We don't want to talk about it anymore. And I think that's how you honor the people that you lost. That's how you make sure you do it the better way next time, is you break it down. What was good, what was bad. But in one of these conversations, and it was very early on, he was talking about missing the micro relationships. So of course, like in that example, I hadn't gone home to England for almost 2 years by that point. But what he's referring to is exactly what you've discussed. That gentleman in the coffee shop that always, looks and smiles. Like I was reflecting, I totally forgot about this. I was in one of our grocery stores here, one of the healthy stores, and the gentleman on the meat counter, it was his birthday and he'd been stuck working. He was supposed to be off. And so we went and bought him a cupcake and stuck a candle in it and took it back to the meat counter and said, "Happy birthday." It's those little moments, I don't know. I haven't seen him. He doesn't work there anymore, but it's all, the person you sat next to on the bus one day, or, the quick chat you have with someone who's on the side of the road that's homeless, and you either did or didn't have money, but you still had a little conversation with them. Maybe even something you said might have, nudged them slightly towards a better path. You don't know, but those micro relationships add up as well. So you have these deep, intimate relationships, whether it's within the professions that we're in, whether it's with our partners or our children. But then there's all these micro relationships that can be negative. I mean, my wife let a truck in yesterday, and the woman behind us lay on her horn and was flinging her arms around. That's a negative micro relationship. She was obviously having a bad day and probably needed a hug. But yeah, so it's interesting we talk about granular, because if there's enough grains of sugar, now the bowl is full as well. So that diverse spectrum of all these different relationships can be nurturing and healing to a community, or they can be divisive.
Yeah, especially on the road. that's a tricky one too, because I mean it's tough to maintain a level of composure on the road, because there's an anonymity, I think, is what separates people within vehicles, because you're not a person. You're that friggin' Toyota Camry and the friggin' this truck in front of me. It's not a human anymore. It's a vehicle. And I think that's where you have an emotional kind of separation to that. But as you were talking, it reminded me of way back in the day. I used to work at a Safeway deli counter, and I was, cutting people's meat and all that stuff, and it was good times. But I noticed that on certain days, it was a drag working there, because people would come up and I want this, that, and other thing, blah, blah, blah. And they'd walk off. And it was always Friday evenings, right? People don't want to be shopping for groceries on Friday evening, yet there were always people shopping for groceries. And one of the things I started doing was I would get a bag of candy, Skittles or Jujubes or whatever it was, and I'd put it on the counter. And my first interaction with people, they'd come out and be like, "Hey, can I get whatever?" And I'd be like, "You want some candy?" And just that question, it was, as Sean likes to say, it was a pattern interrupt, right? They were no longer there. They were all of a sudden, "Oh, candy? Yeah, sure." And it would immediately bring a smile to someone's face. And whether they took some or not, it would just completely shift their point of view. And I think that these little acts that we can do, these little opportunities to engage one another as human beings, in those micro interactions, in those micro communities, allow us to see more love in the world, if that makes sense. And I think where I'm going with this is that if we all put just a little bit more effort into it, I think life can be better for a lot of people, but it just requires a little bit of effort from us. Sean?
So with that in mind, take two different situations. You've got your family, your extremely close friends. That's one group over here. And you've got the rest of humanity. That's in the other group. Which group is the foundation of your life? In other words, if one group is the mycelium of a mushroom, like the underground network of your life, which is the underground network of your life when it comes to understanding love? Is it the simple human connections, the milliseconds, the micro moments, the nod to the guy who has been there 27 days in a row in a coffee shop, and then on the 28th, he's gone? Is it these micro moments, simple human connection moments, that is the mycelium of our life? Or is it our very small and tight, close clan?
That's a dang good question. James, what do you got?
That's a very pertinent question. And the reason being, I posed that question earlier about leaders, not acting. Another, I guess frustration is the right word, and I understand it. This is an overworked, underslept population that really can't critically think because they're on this meat grinder and they can't get off. But to use that example, the rest of the population is who a first responder is serving, their community, whatever it is, the military member, it might be their entire nation. But at what point, where is that line? Because what I've seen in my profession is, as our working environments have devolved to this deadly state that we're in now, where there's more and more holes, and they're forced to work more and more and more overtime, and they're with their families less and less and less. Going back to that analogy you just gave, which is the most important? I would argue the nearest and dearest is your core. It's the oxygen mask that then you can help someone else on the plane. So getting our line personnel, the boots on the ground, men and women out there, patrolling their streets and protecting the nation, what is the most important thing? Is it the profession? Is it saying yes, even though there's a failure in leadership and you're being asked to do more and more and more and more? Or is it your husband, wife, children, whatever that dynamic is? And I think it's a pretty easy answer for me, at least. That is the most important unit that I'm there for. I will gladly leave my my SEAM and go start helping the other people. But if it's detrimental to that, then I've got to protect that first. So this is what I'm hoping that we can tap into as the first responders of the country, is to re-find what's most important. And I always ask people, why is it that the person that we talked about at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, is working 40 hours a week, but our firefighters are working 80 when they're forced to do an extra shift? Why do your children not deserve to have you home? Why does your wife or husband or partner not deserve to wake up next to you in the morning? So I think that's a really important question. You have to protect that tight group, that your true family unit, and then you go out and protect everyone else. But if protecting other people starts being detrimental to your family unit, you either A, leave the profession completely, or B, which is what I'm hoping most will do, you stand up and say, enough is enough. We need to change this. I will gladly serve my community, but I'm not going to make it at the expense of my family.
And it's such a difficult question, because I in my belief, it's both. I don't think it's one takes precedence over the other in my mind, because the way I likened it was the fact that if I'm eating, let's just say I'm eating a bowl of rice, but 3 of those rice things are poisonous. Well, I need to eat to live, but there's no way that I can sift those out. I don't know which ones they are. So when I think about, if I have a really core group of friends and family who are awesome, but I go to a place of work that is horribly toxic, it doesn't matter how many times I come home, that toxicity is going to affect me at some point. And vice versa. If my home life is toxic, but I got a really great job with a really good crew, and they're going to affect one another. So there's no real way to say it is this or that. I think it really is, it's everything. It's creating a life for yourself that is full of love. And whether it is a lot of micro interactions that are full of love, or a small amount of really deep connections, I think it's all part of it. As Sean put it great, the mycelium of it all, the connection between everything, rather than just the mushrooms that are sitting out in the world of like, this is my spouse and this is my job and this is my community. It's the underground network of it all interacting with each other. And there's some great comments here I just want to touch on real quick before I hit you, Sean. Abstract Karma jumped in here and said they both share equal amounts of underground networks. I think you need both, just at different times. You feed both big and small, as long as it's done from a place of kindness and love, but it starts from within and then it goes out. And then we got Diesel Gun Truck. Scott, good to see you, buddy. He says, I think this is a very good topic. As stereotypical alphas, we don't allow ourselves to outwardly love. This conversation is good in that it's about the discussion. And Operation Trauma Recovery, good to see you, buddy. Cheers, troops. Good conversation. I'm loving this so far. Sean, any thoughts on?
So I proposed the question because it's not like I've got my answer figured out, because I don't think there is a true answer. I don't think that there's a answer today that's going to be the same answer tomorrow or a year from now or a decade from now. The reason I threw it out there is because it's worth considering. It's worth considering both groups. It's worth considering what it means to you over here with a small, tiny silo of love, and then the rest of humanity. You've got to think about both and understand that maybe you're focusing on one rather than the other. Maybe your ratio is skewed. Maybe you can adjust it. Maybe you can adjust it today, and today's adjustment will be different than a month's adjustment from now. Understanding really what we all should be doing. And again, I don't have an answer, but what we all should be doing, I believe, is to understand that love is many things, and it's our job to try to understand it as best as we can. Not just cherry pick one thing, like I'm going to love my family and that's it, that's all. Or I'm just going to love the dude at the coffee shop, that's it, that's all. Look for it everywhere. And that doesn't mean that you've got to accept it all. Like, for me as a veteran, when I got out, like, there was quite enough love in the world, maybe too much for me at that point. I just wasn't that interested in the word love, as it were. I was a little too hard, a little too callous, perhaps a little too calloused. And so I had to soften up. I had to start accepting love and like giving love out and actually thinking of it as love. Because that wasn't part of I didn't have a love language in my head at that time. At least the guys that I was banging with, we weren't all about the kumbaya, that is for sure. And so it's kind of a learned process, I believe. As I'll speak as a man, I find it extremely difficult to hang out with a bunch of dudes and talk all about love for a couple of hours. It's not my jam. But here we are doing it, and I feel good about it. I feel comfortable doing it because I'm with the right guys. And so that is maybe my point that I want to wrap up this little piece with right now is, look, for some of us, love is a difficult conversation. And as Diesel said, like, as quote unquote alpha males, then it's, for whatever reason, it feels like it's even more difficult. If there is such a thing as an alpha male, well, for some, it's more difficult. And so I think that we're just supposed to sink our teeth into it and start the conversation and get comfortable with the conversation for others. Like, even if I'm not doing a great job of explaining love right now, at least someone out there is sitting down watching me struggle through the conversation of love, but staying engaged in it because I'm curious. I want to learn more. I came into this conversation knowing that the panel would have enough ideas and enough opinions and enough experience on this subject that by the end of the conversation, I'd be looking at things differently. And I am. That's a good thing. So for everyone out there who hasn't given much thought to this subject, well, make an effort. And yeah, it might be uncomfortable, but you're helping everyone around you at the end of the day.
That is a fantastic point. James, you got anything to add on that?
I'll just add on something that I was thinking about a while ago. When we think of evolution of the human species, we think about technology, the wheel, the abacus, et cetera, et cetera. Now we've got these, devices that we hold in our hand. I think that real evolution is kindness and compassion. If you subscribe to, for example, us coming from different versions of apes and progressing through that way, when you look at the animal kingdom, there is a difference. And I think if you look at the history of mankind, there was a lot of cruelty, in our past. And so I think that, to me, the evolution, the higher level of mankind is kindness, compassion, and empathy, and actually, striving for peace, which is, why I hope, for example, we'll see in our climate now maybe more diplomacy rather than shipping young men and women off, for even more combat, more, wars and altercations. So yeah, I think if we look at it as in this is the journey of the human, and it's kindness, compassion, and love that actually is going to elevate us. I think it reframes it a little bit. If we regress to being divided and pitted against each other, then we're back in the Middle Ages.
This is an interesting little side note here, but I saw a theory from a anthropologist that was saying that the birth of civilization wasn't agriculture. They found it was when they found the first healed femur, and the reasoning behind that was the fact that that would be a death worthy injury for the most part for most animals in the world, but especially with humans, it requires care. Somebody had to feed that person. Somebody had to look out for them. They had to give them water. They had to do the things that they wouldn't be able to do with a broken femur. And that was actually that. So I'm glad you brought that up. But there's one last thing I want to touch on before we shut her down for the day. Sean, you brought it up, was calluses and being calloused or being callous. And it made me think of, I have calluses on my feet. They start to crack after a while. They start to become painful, all these things that are a negative thing. When initially calluses are kind of a good thing. Like when I'm playing my guitar, I got calluses on my fingertips because they allow you to maintain pressure on things without pain. But eventually they become painful and they stop you stop feeling through them directly. So I'm wondering your guys' thoughts are on calluses and callus when it comes to love, because we can all live lives that are really difficult and you can callous yourself against them very easily. To break through those, though, takes work, takes effort. I had to go buy some foot health care, like the cream stuff that you put onto calluses to try to soften them up so that I could not be in pain anymore. But I want to get your guys' thoughts on what it takes to break through those calluses. James, what do you think?
The moment you said that, I've got my wife says she loves me from the ankles up. I've got the world's ugliest feet, and I've always walked around barefoot almost anywhere I can. I do obviously in martial arts, but even in the gym, we're slinging maces and kettlebells, and I'm barefoot. And it's interesting because I used to do CrossFit for a long time too, and I think that's the perfect analogy. When you are arguably flailing around in CrossFit doing the kipping pull-ups, at first you build up calluses, and just like you said, it's a useful pad. It really is. It does help, the same as on your feet. But if you just keep applying pressure and you don't shave the calluses down, eventually it becomes detrimental. You rip the calluses on your hands, or as I'm sure that we've got the same thing, you get these thick heels on your feet and then they crack and now it's painful. So I think it's a great analogy for stress, good stress that you apply, whether it's, going through some crucible to enter some, tier 1 selection process or the fire service or whatever it is. But then there's got to be that self-care element. You can go and respond to some horrific accident, but then you've got to do the self-care to process what you saw. So if you're not shaving the calluses down to a usable thickness, then they are going to actually be completely detrimental. So it's a really interesting analogy. Pressure is good to a point, but if it's not equally and oppositely addressed with self-care periodically, it becomes detrimental.
I like it. Sean, what do you think?
So I was thinking about Valentine's Day based on this exact same topic, and how it's probably less comfortable for people who are single right now through whatever reason, maybe they lost a partner in their past. Maybe they this, that, and the other thing. Lots of stories, some of them not awesome. But there's people out there on Valentine's Day that Valentine's Day ain't a great day. They've been calloused. And so I think that one of the reasons I haven't put anything up on my social media today about Valentine's Day yet, because I was struggling with this idea of how today Valentine's Day becomes all about the romantic Valentine's Day, the romantic love, how you've got to shed all of the spotlight on your romantic partner. But there's a ton of people out there who don't have a spotlight to shine on anyone. And so I've been holding off on what I'm going to say today in respect to Valentine's Day. And that's what made me do a little bit of a history snoop on Valentine's Day. And you'd mentioned the medieval times, Chan. So I'm just going to kick it out here real quick so that it gives some perspective on what Valentine's Day actually is about. So way back in the day, Roman times, some Valentine's saints, and there were a number of them, at depending on which source you look at, upwards of 30 Saint Valentines, but at least 3 called Saint Valentines died on February 14th or February 15th. What are we at here right now? Oh my goodness.
14th.
February 14th. So several of them died on the same February 14th day. And history as a whole, no scholar can define precisely which Valentine saint it was, in which year, which death. Regardless, someone called Saint Valentine's died on February 14th. Now, how did they die? They didn't die. They got killed. They were martyred for their beliefs. And so the Catholic Church then martyred them. And so they're famous for being killed on Valentine's Day. And the only reason they became famous, and this is no joke, in medieval times, Chaucer, English poet, wrote a poem, and in one of the verses, it refers to Saint Valentine's, and how birds on a tree branch look at each other with love. Now, I'm not going to extrapolate out a whole story about that, but suffice to say, an unknown saint got killed. A poet in the Middle Ages wrote about Saint Valentine's and knew very little about it. It got romanticized by the small group of friends around Chaucer, to include Shakespeare and etc. And now we have a over $30 billion U.S. industry, just in the U.S. alone, that is built off of the love industry. So we went from martyred to selling chocolates in the space of 600 years. And the fascinating thing is that Valentine's Day was built on a legend. It's like no one can prove it. And the legend is pure marketing at this point. And so now we've got that backstory, kind of dark, where most people don't understand why there is a Valentine's Day. All they know is if you don't buy a big enough box of chocolates, you don't love enough. And so that's where we're at right now, in a distorted sense of what love means out there on the street to the common man or woman. We don't really understand sometimes, I believe, how to demonstrate our love in a more authentic way, because the overlayer of propaganda and social media and social peer pressure has forced down our throat a version of love that maybe doesn't feel right to us. And that's where I'm at today. I was thinking about the people who don't have something to maybe celebrate on Valentine's Day, but somehow feel like they've got to go buy a big freaking box of chocolates.
The commercialism is tough. And, you know, I talked about this, I think during Christmas time too, is that it's the inundation. It's the media inundation. Like, you can't go anywhere without being surrounded by it, right? Especially Valentine's Day as well. A couple of weeks beforehand, like late January, you start seeing them in stores, you start hearing it on the radio. It's just this constant pressure. So I see where you're coming from with this, Shauna. It is a the over commercialization of it is definitely a challenge, especially for a story that doesn't really have a beginning, as it's just a mishmash of other stories. And I think this is at least a little bit critical to the point of expressing one's love, is that it doesn't have to be romantic, it doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be chocolate, it doesn't have to be red, it doesn't have to be any of these things. It can be whatever it is we want it to be. And if we're expressing love to our fellow man, to our spouse, to people we don't know, then I think that's the key. And there's a good comment on this one that I just want to touch on really quickly. Blackwater Technical Diving jumped in here earlier when we were talking about the history of Valentine's Day, and he said, should be a day to remember what the symbols are and the meaning behind the heart. What does the heart do for us? People forget to love not just one another, but to love themselves as well. It requires love. And I think that's just such a great point, in that we forget a lot of the times that based on the fact that we have a commercial environment that we live in, 30 billion US dollars a year is it's a lot of money going towards chocolate and red things and teddy bears and just stuff that doesn't mean anything, because the meaning comes from the daily acts, rather than the one day, here's a box of chocolate, in my mind.
But it started off innocently. In the late 1800s, a lady down in the United States thought, well, I'm just going to demonstrate my love a little bit more. So she made a little homemade card. I've forgotten her name. It was Eustace or something like that. And put a little bit of a lace fringe around the card and handed it off, and became kind of a little bit of a celebrity in a small way, because people really liked her cards. I remember, James, you'll probably remember this as well. Back in the day in England, like back in the 60s, people handmade their Valentine's Day cards. Like they were handwritten or like Crayola crayoned or hand whatevered. There wasn't a big Hallmark card industry. In fact, it wasn't until the very, very late 1800s that Hershey first started their advertising campaign on Valentine's Day. And then it was in the around 1913 or something like that Hallmark got in the game, picking up on the lace fringe cards. So it went from a handcrafted way to demonstrate your love to now the only way you can demonstrate how much you love a person is to have a really thick wallet to buy all the Hershey's, to buy all the Hallmarks. That industry has conflated a legend into a massive shill industry unless you pay attention. Don't get lost in the box of chocolates. Get lost in trying to understand what love means to you in your head. Figure it out today. Get lost somewhere in your inside world and understand what today's supposed to be. Don't fall for the shill. Don't fall for the snake oil salesman of Hershey and Hallmark and all of that good stuff. They ain't in it to win it with you. So figure out where you stand on that relationship.
This brings up an interesting thing in my brain, because we sent my boys to school with lollipops and little cards that they made, and they went off to school to do their things. And I remember being in school here in Canada, and we used to have to do Valentine's Day. It was required. Like, you had to show up with cards and hand them off to everybody in your classroom, and everybody had to like it. But because it was mandatory, as a kid, you never really think about it. And no one ever stops you and says, hey man, what do you think about love? What does it mean to you? Right? Who do you love? What does that even... Those types of questions don't get engaged. And I'm going to be engaging my kids with this later tonight when I get home from all my other stuff. But I want to engage people in those conversations. That's why I picked this topic for today specifically. And that without these discussions, without these conceptual back and forths, you are left to candygrams. You're left to buying teddy bears. And again, like you said, how thick is your wallet? And that's how much you love people. And that is a pretty horrible way to view love, in my mind, at least. James, you got anything?
Yeah, just as funny, when I went to the store yesterday, and I did buy some flowers, and my wife is dairy intolerant, so I had to get this oat milk chocolate bar for her as well. But when I walked in, again, human interaction, one of the guys at the store was like, how you doing? I was like, I'm doing well. How you doing? This is the most unromantic day of the year, isn't it? When we're told to buy flowers and chocolate. And it's funny, because if you take a step back, you think about the shame and guilt from a mental health perspective of people, and it could be Valentine's, it could be the spread that you see in a Christmas movie, and all the people that are in this big lavish house, and there's, 2 turkeys and all the things. We have been sold alive by this commercialism element. And if you look at not just Valentine's Day, think about engagement rings. I think it was De Boers, I forget that it was a Dutch name, the South African company, that told, the advertising told them you need to spend 3 months' salary on a ring. Why? You know what I mean? It was pure marketing. You look at Christmas, that happy red, suited wearing Santa is Coca-Cola's creation. So there's commercialism behind all this. And my wife and I laugh because Chance, you said about January when the hearts, I disagree. It's like December when they're doing the Valentines. And now by the time you get to January, it's already St. Patrick's Day and Easter. It's got so out of control. And we can laugh at it, but the bad side of it is the guilt and the shame of not being good enough with the father that can't afford the lavish, Christmas presents, or the girlfriend that's scraping together. She's a single mother and she wants to do something for her new boyfriend, and the TV is telling you have to do all these things. Get him a man crate. That's what he needs. It really is detrimental when you look at it, and kind of really reframing Valentine is the most unromantic day, and surprise the person that you love. That is romantic. Just clean the house, make the bed, and put a single rose on there. I mean, that's so much more powerful than some, god awful, like you said, massive diabetes heart that you're going to pass them. So I think really kind of taking a step back and identifying the forced capitalism that has infiltrated these beautiful holidays. It empowers you to not feel guilty and ashamed about not being able to match this massive monetary bar that they put on us.
Yeah, it is a consistent challenge.
Where's my
to get
man
out of.
crate?
Right? I didn't get a man crate.
Dude, where's my man crate?
Hey, my wife did get me
Where does a guy
new
buy a
chocolate.
man crate?
I don't even know. where
Online, mancrates.com.
Mancrates.com.
Perfect.
There you go. You're set. For all the ladies out there, you can get a man crate. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for James, John, and John. Great conversation. We're just about 2 hours here. I have a couple of comments I want to touch on here before we shut her down. But James, Sean, and both Johns, thank you. Been a fantastic conversation. Corbin Bobby jumped in here earlier. He said, love transcends space and time, where bonds with family and friends are as vital as fleeting connections with strangers, channeling positive energy through every moment and place. I like it. It's almost like a quantum theory of love, and that's awesome. Abstract Karma jumped in and said, I made it about love, my children, my family, my friends. That's how I approach today's holiday on IG, which is, I think, a great approach to it. And then she carries on, love should be expressed daily and not because of this day, which is, I think, absolutely very true. Any final thoughts? Anything still burning in the back of your brain, James?
No, I think we had a great conversation, so I'll just leave it there. But thank you.
Always a pleasure. Sean, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add because I think it was a really good conversation. Considering like this is a challenging conversation, I think, for anyone, but it's certainly, I'll categorize it as extremely challenging for the kind of guys that were on this panel. I'll speak for myself. Love is not something that I talk about every single day, but perhaps we should be. And so I'm glad everyone hung out and hopefully learned a thing or two. I know I did. Thoroughly engaging combo. And James, really appreciate everything that you do, of course. And thanks to the boys who had to bounce early, but really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, what do you got?
Actually, sorry, just to jump in, because just reminded me, Sean, one of the things that I've loved seeing, using the word love there, is men telling each other that they love each other. So I've got close friends who are, altruistic and, people that I've been through some tough times with, and they'll say, I love you. And I think that movement is amazing. Now, again, it's not blasé. You're not telling the guy at the butcher store that you love them because they gave you a pork chop. But, this close male relationships in this particular example, not being afraid to say that. Because if you think about it, what do you do when you see someone that you have that kind of relationship with? You hug them. Well, that's just a physical example of love. So be able to verbalize it, destigmatize this word, I think that's a powerful movement. I'm seeing it happen someone used the word alpha. These are alphas that we're talking about. And I know we all kind of laugh at that kind of label because it's ridiculous, but the selfless, warriors in the garden that a lot of us surround ourselves by. I love the fact that we're starting to be able to say, I love you to these men that we work alongside.
I totally agree with that one. And I think that not only that, but the care that it takes to get to a point where you can truly appreciate and love someone else. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes time, it takes development. It's not just going to happen tomorrow. And one of the things that I absolutely love about the collective is the fact that I get to make these connections. I get to have not only these micro interactions, but then I get the macro interactions of having people come back on, like yourself, James, consistently showing up, putting the work in, and just kicking ass. This is awesome. And I love having difficult conversations about things that most people don't want to do. And my last thought on this is that the concept of alphas. If you are a leader, which everybody is a leader, you are leading somebody somewhere, even if it's just yourself, needs to love the person that they're leading. That's what it comes down to. So if you're just leading yourself, love yourself. If you're just leading your family, love them. But don't be afraid to show it. Don't be afraid to be that guy. Be a leader. I think it's fantastic. So thank you guys once again. And as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.